What you are going to see right now is Vice President Al Gore dismissing members of his own party objecting to the electoral vote count from the state of Florida in January 2001. What happened 20 years ago now has extreme relevance to what is going to happen on January 6th. In 2001, elected representatives from his own party were making a case to Al Gore, for Al Gore, who lost the state of Florida by 537 votes and the presidency along with it.
Order. Mr. President, there are many Americans who still believe that the results we are going to certify today are illegitimate.
Mr. President, the certificate of the electoral vote of the state of Florida seems to be regular and informed and authentic, and appears therefore and therefrom that George W. Bush of the state of Texas received 25 votes for president, and Dick Cheney of the state of Wyoming received 25 votes for vice president.
By a member of the House of Representatives and by a senator.
I must object because of the overwhelming evidence of official misconduct, deliberate fraud, and an attempt to suppress
The chair must
voter
remind
turnout.
members that under Section 18 of Title III.
Mr. Vice President, there are gross violations of the Voting Rights Act from Florida,
The
and I object, and it is not signed by a senator.
Gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, arise.
Well, Mr. President, I am objecting to the idea that votes in Florida were not counted, and it's a sad day in America, Mr. President, when we can't find a senator to sign
The
these
gentleman will suspend.
They were asking the then Vice President to decide the fate of Florida's electoral vote himself. They were asking Al Gore to be the judge and the defendant at the same time. The stakes were much higher and favorable for Al Gore because it was he who would have become the president. And unlike the 2020 election, the difference between Al Gore and George Bush was just only one state, and even that state was so close that only 537 votes separated him and Bush out of 6 million votes cast. But despite all of that, Al Gore not only conceded the election to Bush, he stood there during the joint session of Congress and made sure that the electors' votes were counted properly. Just ask yourself what Trump would have done if he lost the election by a single state where the difference between him and Biden was less than 1,000 votes in a state where 10 million votes were cast. Not only that, Al Gore never uttered a word against the Supreme Court, even though half the country felt conflicted by the verdict that stopped the recount in Florida, which effectively handed over the presidency to George Bush. Al Gore's behavior during that time can only be termed as presidential. It was as presidential as it can get. Now Trump and some supporters are trying to get Vice President Mike Pence to do something or anything during the electoral vote counting process on January 6th. Under the theory put forward by Republican Representative Louis Gohmert and a number of Republicans, Mike Pence can open the box of electoral votes and then he should decide to not count votes from states that are contested, disqualify enough votes, and keep chopping things down until Trump's 232 electoral votes becomes enough for him to become the next president. So this is all great in theory, but has no relevance or truth in the real world. If the Vice President had that kind of power, then Vice President Joe Biden, a Democrat, could have appointed Hillary Clinton, a fellow Democrat, as the president in 2017. Vice President Al Gore could have appointed himself the president of the country in 2001. Vice President Dan Quayle could have rejected Bill Clinton and reinstalled himself and Bush Sr. for a second term in '93. If this is the case, why bother with a 4-year term for presidents? We might as well grant the vice president and the president an 8-year term or a checkbox that selects auto-renew at the end of 4 years. The theory that the VP can intervene in the vote counting process is absurd, stupid, and reckless. Listen to George Conway breaking the procedure further down for us.
George, thanks for joining us. What's your reaction to Senator Hawley saying that he's going to reject the election results and force every Senate Republican to go on the record and say whether or not they side with him or side with the facts and the truth?
Jake, thanks for having me, first of all. It would be comical if it weren't about such a serious matter as the integrity of our election process. This is just the height of absurdity. This election is over. It's over not just in terms of voters casting their votes, but it's over in terms of what the Electoral College has done. Under the governing federal statute that covers the counting of electoral votes before the joint session of Congress on January 6th, the only thing that Congress can do is consider objections right now to whether or not there were forged votes from the electors. The electors have been certified by the governors of all the states, including the states that Trump has contested. And because of that, under the governing federal statutes, those votes from those electors have to be taken as valid, unless there's some reason, like, it's written in crayon or something, that they don't have to believe that they don't have the proper certificates before them. The only thing that's left to do is to open the ballots, which is the votes, which is what the Vice President Pence is supposed to do, sitting as president of the Senate, and for everyone to count them together and get to 270, and they'll get to 306 for Joe Biden, and he'll win. That's
the Electoral Count Act of 1887 accorded the Congress with only one job on January 6th, to verify the electoral votes are cast by electors who are appointed by the state. If so, then it gets counted. According to Edward Foley, a constitutional law professor at Ohio State University and former state solicitor in the office of Ohio's Attorney General, the 1887 Act requires the state governor to affix the seal of the state to the certificate confirming the appointment of electors. These rules were put in place in the 18th century, a period where counterfeiting was a common occurrence. So a rule was kept to make sure that the Congress is counting the correct documents and not forged ones. But the archaic law has never changed, and we are still following them. Never mind the umpteen number of times it could have got the country into trouble. But somehow, the cracks never turned themselves into catastrophes, as we have had upright people on both sides standing up to the occasion. But today is not yesterday. And now we have people openly arguing that a ceremonial process of getting the electoral votes and counting them be turned into something else. The Constitution says only this: the President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. So the Constitution requires the Congress to accept whatever the state decides regarding the appointment of its electors. It does not give anyone the power to decide which state has to vote in which direction. And neither does it give the Senate President the power to disqualify electoral votes from a particular state. So I don't think Mike Pence will try to do something out of the ordinary during the vote counting process, because it's a losing hand. If there is one representative from Congress and one senator dispute a state's result, both the chambers, the Congress and the Senate, will take a break, deliberate, and get back together and vote on how to move forward. The Democrats are in control of the Congress, and on January 6th, we will have only 98 senators, 50 Republicans and 48 Democrats. The Democrats only need 2 Republicans to vote with them to keep the counting process. Though Mitch McConnell himself has asked his party members to not do anything unnecessary on that day, we can safely assume that the Democrats have a lot more than the 2 votes they need. Mitt Romney, Ben Sasse, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, John Thune, Pat Toomey, all of them have already called Biden the president-elect. And these are extremely reliable votes for Democrats if the need arises. While senators like Josh Hawley have made it clear that they will push for a vote to happen on the floor. My point is this: Vice President Mike Pence knows this. He understands that the move to subvert the counting process will fail because there aren't enough votes to see through in the 98-member Senate. If a state's result is contested with the support of a congressman and a senator, there is not much Pence can do to stop the voting from taking place. So it's going to happen. And Pence will just say he is following the rules. Truth be told, that's the rule and he is going to follow it. We cannot blame Pence for it. And so far, most of the things that Trump has done in the name of elections had one side benefit for him, which is to raise as much money from people and send it to his Super Pac. Reports that came until early December showed that Donald Trump's campaign had actually raised $200 million by the end of November, while spending $8.8 million towards litigation. The differential amount that was left could have easily gotten much higher in the last few weeks. Though the fundraising has continued non-stop, The January 6 maneuver has another factor hidden behind the layers of action. This move will allow Trump to define the party, the GOP, into two parts. By pushing for a vote on the Senate floor, Trump can identify the senators who are supporting him, such as Josh Hawley, and senators who are opposed to him. With Trump's Save America Super Pac flush with cash, he may end up controlling future elections. We can guarantee with 100% confidence that GOP primary contestants can now look for Twitter endorsements from Donald Trump. And if they are lucky, they might even get some money from Trump Super PAC. But most probably, as they run for elections, Trump Super PAC will continue raising money in the name of helping their campaign, just like what happened in this Georgia Senate race. So his support may come at a cost, and we can also assure ourselves that Trump will attack anyone within the GOP who he thinks is not sufficiently loyal to him. On January 6th, the fight between Trump and GOP leadership to control the party will be out in the open. By the end of that day, we will have two GOPs, one supporting Trump and one staying silently behind the red line. Mitch McConnell has already drawn his sword out to take on Donald Trump. Despite Trump pushing the GOP to agree to increasing the COVID relief checks from $600 to $2,000, Mitch McConnell blocked the vote on the Senate floor. And to make his stand even more clear, he told the world that the Senate will not be bullied into signing it. The word bully is most notable in his statement, and we all know who he addressed with that line. Mitch McConnell has broken up with Trump, and this is one breakup that is not going to be pretty.